Saint John Bosco's prophecy about the future of his Salesians in South America, Part 2. If you haven't seen Part 1 yet, just click on the link at the top of the screen. The Miracles and Prophecies of Saint John Bosco, a project of America Needs Fatima. I'm your host, Matthew Miller. Subscribe for new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. How will we manage, I asked. How will we succeed in bringing all these people to the flock of Jesus Christ? How will you manage? My guide responded. Just watch. And in came Father Lago, who was carrying a basket of small green figs. Take some, Don Bosco, he said. What are you bringing me? I replied, looking at the contents of the basket. I was told to bring them to you. But these figs aren't ready to eat. They're not ripe. Then my young friend took the basket, which was very broad but shallow, and gave it to me, saying, Here's my gift to you. And what am I to do with these figs? These figs are unripe, he said, but they belong to the great fig tree of life. You must find a way to make them ripen. How? If they were a little bigger, they could mature under straw, as other fruits do. But they're so small, so green. It's impossible. Well then, he said, know that to make them ripen, you have to find some way of reattaching these figs to the tree. Impossible! How can that be done? Well, just watch, he responded, and he took a fig, dipped it into a basin of blood, then immediately dipped it into another basin full of water and said, With sweat and blood, the savages will turn back and be reattached to the plant, thus becoming pleasing to the master of life. But to accomplish this will take time, I thought to myself. Then I said aloud, I don't know what else I can say. That dear youth, reading my mind, continued, This success will take place before the second generation comes to an end. Which will be the second generation? I asked. Don't count the present generation, he said. There shall be another, and then another. I spoke in utter confusion, baffled, spluttering, as I heard the magnificent destiny awaiting our congregation. And I asked, But how many years does each of these generations include? 60, he said. And then? Do you wish to see what will happen then? Come, he said. Without my knowing how, I found myself in a railroad station. A huge crowd was gathered there, and we boarded a train. I asked where we were. The young man replied, Take notice and watch carefully. We're traveling along the Andes. You have your road also open to the east all the way to the sea. It's another of the Lord's gifts. And when shall we go to Boston, where they're waiting for us? I asked. Everything at its own time, he said, taking out a map in which the Diocese of Cartagena stood out prominently. That was the point of our departure. As we went along, my friend kept talking much, but because of the train's noise, I couldn't fully hear him. Nevertheless, I learned many very wonderful and new things about astronomy, navigation, meteorology, minerals, fauna, and flora, the topography of those areas, which he explained to me with marvelous precision. Meanwhile, he seasoned his speech with a courteous and at the same time gentle familiarity, which showed his love for me. From the very start, he took my hand and kept me always very affectionately in his tight clasp to the very end of the dream. I placed my other hand lightly in his, but his hand seemed to disappear under mine, as though it had evaporated, and my left hand merely held my right. The young man smiled at my useless efforts. In the meantime, I was looking out the carriage window, and I saw whiz before me various astonishing regions, forests, mountains, plains, very long majestic rivers which I couldn't believe to be so wide at points so far from their mouths. For more than 1,000 miles we skirted the edge of a virgin forest which hasn't been explored even today. My gaze took on a marvelous power of vision. There were no obstacles that could block its view. I don't know how to explain what strange phenomenon took place in my eyes. I felt like someone standing on a hilltop who sees, stretching out before him, a vast panorama. If he holds even a tiny strip of paper close to his eyes, he can see little or nothing. But if he drops it or moves it up or down, his gaze can reach out to the farthest horizon. This is what happened to me because of the extraordinary insight that was given to me, but the difference was this. Every now and then, as I set my gaze upon one spot, and that one spot whizzed past me, it was as if a series of curtains were being raised, and I saw stretching out before me interminable distances. Not only did I see the Andes when I was a long distance from them, but that chain of mountains even stood out in those immeasurable plains and was clearly visible to me in every tiny detail. The mountain ranges of Colombia, Venezuela, the three Guyanas, Brazil, and Bolivia, even to their farthest boundaries. I was then able to verify the correctness of the words I had heard at the beginning of my dream and the grand hall straddling the equator. I could see into the very bowels of the mountains and into the remotest hidden recesses of the plains. Before my eyes lay the incomparable riches of those countries, which will one day be discovered. I saw countless mines of precious metals, inexhaustible caverns of coal, oil deposits so abundant as have never yet been discovered elsewhere. But that wasn't all. Between 15 and 20 degrees latitude lay a very broad and very lengthy body of water that had its origin from the end of a lake. Then a voice kept repeating to me, when the mines hidden in the midst of these mountains will eventually be dug out, here will appear the promised land flowing with milk and honey. Its wealth will defy belief. But that wasn't all either. My greatest surprise was to see how the Andes in several places reverted upon themselves and formed valleys of whose existence present-day geographers haven't even the slightest idea. They think that in those areas the mountainsides are sheer walls. In those valleys and hollows, some of which extended as much as 600 miles, lived crowded, countless peoples who have not yet come in contact with Europeans. Entire nations completely unknown to us. The train kept rushing along, turning here and there, and finally coming to a halt. A fair number of passengers got off at this point to continue their journey through the Andes to the west. At this point, there's a note from the Salesians. Don Bosco indicated Bolivia. The station was probably La Paz, where a tunnel could open the way to the Pacific coast and link Brazil with Lima by means of a junction with another railroad. The train began to move again, heading always forward. We passed along the banks of the Uruguay River. I always thought it was a short river, but instead it's very long. At one point I saw the Parana River, winding its way to the Uruguay as though it were bringing it the tribute of its waters. But after somewhat paralleling it for a stretch, it pulled away, forming a huge elbow. Both these rivers were enormous. The train kept forging its way, turning here and there, and after a long time it made a second stop. Another large number of people got off there and made their way westward through the Andes. Here, Don Bosco indicated the province of Mendoza in Argentina, and the tunnel led to Santiago, capital of the Republic of Chile. Finally, we reached the Strait of Magellan. I looked all about me. We alighted. Before me lay Punta Arenas. For several miles, the ground was cluttered with mounds of coal, boards, railroad ties, huge piles of minerals, and the fields were partially covered with flocks, partially tilled. My friend pointed all these things out to me. Then I asked, "And now what are you trying to tell me with all this?" He answered, "What is now merely a project will one day be a reality. In time to come, these savages will be so domesticated that they shall willingly come for instruction, religion, civilization, and trading. What elsewhere excites wonder among people will here assume such stupendous proportions as to arouse more astonishment than does anything else now." "I've seen enough," I replied. "Now take me to see my Salesians in Patagonia." And if you'd like to hear about what he saw there in his vision, please come back Wednesday for our third part in this series. In the meantime, if you'd like to hear more dreams of Saint John Bosco, just click on this playlist above me here. Thank you all so much for watching. God bless you, and Our Lady keep you. Let's go.